Vault Hunters, so you're thinking of playing Amon, the axe-wielding menace that survived a vault monster attack and is out for vengeance. It's a good choice if you want a more melee-focused character that stands taller than every enemy on the battlefield. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and this is why you want to play Amon in Borderlands 4. Amon is easily the odd Vault Hunter out, purely based on his melee-focused playstyle. Early game, while you're still leveling up and unlocking passives and augments, you might find that he's a bit clunky, but once you can realize a complete build, he can stand on his own or within a co-op group, so long as you can get a handle on his very unique kit. Unlike the other Vault Hunters, Amon actually has 3 different active traits, all of which are tied to the action skill currently equipped. The first is called Firewall, connected to the Scourge action skill. When used, Amon deploys a large digital wall that absorbs any enemy projectiles that pass through and buff the damage and projectile speed of any allied bullets that pass through. Absorb damage is converted into vengeance so long as the Scourge ability is active. Enemies also take incendiary damage over time if they're anywhere near the firewall. This is the most indirect of the 3 active traits, but also the one that could have the most impact within a group setting. The second trait, Double Edge, is tied to the Crucible action skill, and this one is straightforward. When used, Amon throws out a twinned Forge Axe dealing cryo melee damage to any enemies it passes through, while dealing incendiary melee damage if it hits enemies on the way back. Think of a boomerang. The final trait, Molten Slam, is tied to the third action skill, Onslaughter. When used, Amon slams his Forge Hammer into the ground, dealing incendiary melee damage in a medium-sized AoE around the character. Now, because each trait is tied to the action skill, there's nothing really to dissect. You'll just want to make sure you're utilizing both the trait and the action skill together, which is true for every Vault Hunter. Scourge is Amon's first action skill, and it's one of the more unique offerings in the game. When activated, Amon lifts his shield, absorbing all frontal damage as vengeance. When the vengeance meter is filled, Amon also receives a massive damage reduction. While active, you can also send out a Forge Wave by pressing F on keyboard or left bumper on controller. This deals cryo ordnance damage to all enemies it passes through, consuming vengeance to increase its damage. There's 2 parts to this action skill: the defensive aspect that requires you to actively soak damage coming your way, building vengeance, and the offensive part, using Forge Wave to deal piercing cryo damage. The key is to master the art of the shield, because the better you get at soaking damage, the more vengeance you can accumulate, which in turn makes the ability even more potent. When you add augments and capstones into the mix, things get even more interesting, because these all directly change the nature of the action skill. Something like Blast Chill is more straightforward, adding an AoE component to the ability and creating a nice synergy with Firewall, the trait. There are other offensive first augments as well, and while they're each a bit different, they're absolutely aimed at maximizing the damage potential of the ability. On the flip side, an augment like Cryonic Thrum is more focused on utility, giving him a taunt and restoring health to nearby allies, on top of some modest bonus gun damage. The other augments fall somewhere on that spectrum, but in the case of something like Stormlance, the ability completely changes from cryo to storm damage, which I also think is really interesting. As far as the capstones go, each of these 3 options changes the nature of the Firewall trait entirely. Ring of Frostfire changes the wall into a ring, dealing incendiary damage to enemies inside and cryo damage to enemies that pass through the barrier. Glacial Rapture is completely different. When used, Amon will swing Forge Whips, dealing multiple instances of cryo damage before creating a cryonic fissure that deals damage and leaves an AoE on the ground for a few seconds. Finally, there's Wrathfall, which, when used, calls down a massive Forge Sword, dealing a high amount of shock damage to enemies in the area. What you choose is going to come down to what type of damage you want to deal, and that's going to be influenced by your build. Ring of Frostfire is most similar to Firewall, while the others transform the trait into something offensively focused. Amon's second action skill is called Crucible. When used, you get the choice to throw out either a Flame Axe dealing incendiary melee damage, or a Frost Axe dealing cryo melee damage. Enemies that are hit by the ability are primed and will detonate when they die or are damaged by another Forge skill, dealing damage to nearby enemies. You can hold up to 3 charges of this ability at any one time, and if you go pick up the axe, you gain a decent amount of charge back. I really like this skill because it's straightforward and fun to use. Weaving this into your gunplay becomes seamless, and as you augment the ability, it only gets better. The first two augments you unlock for Crucible are straightforward and perfect as you're leveling up. Axe and Stone grants you increased movement speed and gives you the chance to reduce the cooldown of your action skill and ordnance, while Endless War is all about empowering your guns and spawning additional heat-seeking forge axes. This actually ends up being a really interesting augment as it turns Amon into a sort of summoner, and you can lean into that identity even more with additional passive nodes scattered throughout his tree. Where things get interesting are with the second tier of augments, two of which change the status damage profile of the action skill. Hour of the Hammer allows you to deal frost or shock damage, while Blade Tempest allows you to deal flame or shock damage. There are some additional quirks to each augment too, which further transforms the ability. The Capstone functions a bit different, actually changing the nature of your trait, Double Edge. Snowmaul deals cryo damage and adds a ricocheting effect to the ability. Storm Surge changes the damage to shock and adds an AoE component, and Conflangerang embraces incendiary damage more so than the initial trait. Amon's final action skill is called Onslaughter, and it's the one I think has the most upside potential. When activated, Amon gains constant shield regeneration, bonus incendiary damage with guns, and increased movement speed. While active, you can also use your melee attack to rocket punch, dashing to the targeted enemy, dealing incendiary melee damage in a cone and causing stagger. That's a lot of things happening at one time, and when you weave in your Molten Slam trait, it gets really intense, in a good way. The action skill by nature encourages aggressive play, but also gives you that added defensiveness in the form of the constant shield regeneration to lean into that playstyle. As you might expect with an ability of this nature, all of Amon's 5 augments that enhance this action skill just make it more offensively potent. Something like Pyroclast further encourages being up in the enemy's face by adding an AoE effect around Amon and increasing his survivability, while all 3 of the tier 2 augments allow you to lean into different damage types, which is consistent with the other skill trees. This is easily Amon's most aggressive action skill, which I think is going to speak to a lot of players that are initially interested in playing him. As we've seen with the other skill trees, the capstones change the nature of the trait. Core Cleave changes the damage type to Cryo and now is a wave attack. Molten Rail amplifies what you already had with Molten Slam, adding even more size and damage to the trait. And Stormcutter changes things up to deal shock damage in a wave, while also making your skills recharge faster. Amon, more than any other character, has 3 distinct action skills, and each substantially changes the way he plays. This can be a bit awkward as you're leveling up, and things like Scourge might not feel great, but as you progress into harder content with more passive skill nodes unlocked, everything starts to come into focus. Amon, by design, is a melee-oriented character, and while you absolutely can still deal insane amounts of damage with guns, you'd be a fool not to embrace his character identity, whether that's with the whip, the axe, or gauntlet. Calculated aggression is the name of the game, and with the right build, you can easily hold your own solo or in co-op. So there you have it, everything you need to get started with Amon in Borderlands 4. As always, if you guys appreciate the work that goes into making these videos and you want more Borderlands 4 in your feed, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.